The Defense Department is only as strong as the defense industrial base, the population of companies that make what's needed to carry out military and national security tasks. For a look into what sort of investments the Defense Department is making into the DIB, we turn to the Senior Vice President for Government Relations at Govini, Jeb Nadahner. Mr. Nadahner, good to have you with us.
Great to be with you, Tom, and with your listeners.
I guess there's a presumption in the way I stated this interview is that there is a problem with the defense industrial base, and we've seen it in the capacity for howitzer shells, but it's much wider than that. Why don't you define it for us based on the data that Govini has amassed?
Well, Govini is a software and data company. We produce, on a commercial basis, purpose-built software for the Defense Acquisition System. The message I have is the Defense Acquisition System, which has been producing really ever less in most categories for ever more dollars over the last 30 years. The Defense Acquisition System does not have to be this bad. And one of the problems is the Defense Department doesn't use the software and data that all first-class enterprises in the world, whether in the U.S. or abroad, friendly or adversary, uses. And bringing that kind of software and data into the Defense Acquisition System can really change the timelines and the costs.
Well, that then is presupposing that everything the Defense Department needs for platforms and et cetera, and for logistics and for whatever it is they need to support troops and activities around the world is there in the U.S. economy. They just can't find it because of the procurement system?
So the U.S. has been through several waves of deindustrialization, relative deindustrialization. There's still a certain amount that we produce and our allies produce. And sometimes we're down to one or two suppliers compared to just 30 years ago, there might have been 30 suppliers for a given part. The key is to find that one supplier or the one substitute supplier really quickly, rather than missing the part and the production line shuts down for 4 months while people look through yellow pages. That's an unacceptable solution. We can't recreate a defense industrial base like World War II in the next 3 to 5 years, or probably even a decade or two. What we can do is we can make a lot better use of the defense industrial base that we've got.
Well, let me challenge you here. Suppose I'm buying a gyroscopic component for navigation for a platform, and I need replacements. That company is there. I've been buying from it already, and all I need to do is issue a task order or a request for proposals to the same company.
Well, let's say that company that the U.S. Defense and DoD has been buying from. Let's say the couple that owns it ages out. They decide to retire. They shut down. They shut down their little plant. I mean, that's been happening over 30 years. We have ever fewer small businesses, and small businesses really form the base of the defense industrial base. And when they retire out, we lose a major capability. So if that happens, okay, what's the alternative then? Import the part from China? That's definitely an option, and we do a lot of that. But I think there's a better option, which is try and find that other supplier that may be working on the commercial side in the U.S. Find the supplier that's in Italy or Korea. That's a much better alternative. Or here's something else that you can do with software. If you have the right software and data, like our Govini's ARC, the ARC of knowledge, on all these kinds of things, one can find the patents for the technology and then maybe qualify a new supplier. That's all possible, but it's not possible if one is relying on a spreadsheet or Charlie or Jane's memory in the back of the room.
That sounds almost like a market research challenge.
Well, part of it's a market research challenge. United States is a country, realistically speaking, we're above 350 million people. So defense industrial base is not what it was. Even commercial manufacturing was it was, but it's still a lot of capability. And then we've got, of course, Mexico and the best alliance system in the world. So there's still a lot we can do. The easy thing to do always is to order ultimately from China. That's a really easy thing to do.
And they'll be glad to take the order.
But that comes with immense risk should there be a trade shutdown or a slowdown, or they decide to penalize us.
We were speaking with Jeb Nadahner. He is Senior Vice President for Government Relations at Govini. And just to get back to a point that we went by pretty quickly, if you can find someone that is making a similar product, or a related product or a product using the same, say, I'll just use casting technology that you need for the DoD part, then they could be persuaded with the possibility of a contract to expand what they do to make the military version or the shape we need of that particular casting, since we know they can already cast.
That's exactly the case. They may need to tweak a little bit based on the blueprint and the requirement, but something they can do. And this is something that we help a number of program executive offices in DoD. This is the DoD that exists outside the Beltway that is actually in charge of managing and overseeing these long contractor supply chains from the primes on down. And that's something we do, for example, with the Minuteman system, keeping that system going. So there are parts in that system that entered the system in 1970. The supplier no longer exists, but we will then identify alternative suppliers or suppliers that do something pretty close. And then you suddenly have a part that you didn't have before.
And you mentioned, too, looking at the patent situation, and the patent, that takes some AI to look through all the patents and the prior art, but that's definitely a clue to who's doing what. But what if you're looking for something for which patents might have expired and there's still alternative sources? What are some other routes besides the patent system for identifying potential suppliers?
So one of the beauties of machine learning, AI-enabled data, this is not the data. It's not data like in a footnote in college where you say, oh, I found a book and here's a source. Rather, if you collect vast amounts of data and you're vacuuming it in constantly, as we do, and you end up, the data then, the machine learning actually ends up creating correlations and begins merging forms of data. So you end up with very rich things. So if you take patent data, all sorts of technology data, financial data, capital flow data, you can actually discover company data. You can actually discover parts and components and technologies that would not be readily available just if you looked at a single source. The importance is the merger of all this data. You can't, by the way, no one sitting in a program executive office can go from database to database. They don't have the time for that. What they need is this merge data, and that's the beauty of AI.
Give us an example. Can you think of a time where, say, using Govini data, someone found, there's, John and Joe's shop that makes exactly the caliper we need?
Well, we've done it on the Minuteman program. We've done it in military rotary programs. We are going to start doing it on F-35 readiness. And readiness involves knowing, you got to know not only your parts, but you got to know your parts on hand. You need to know your alternative suppliers. You need to know something like the F-35, because of its stealth characteristics, requires all sorts of specialized coatings, which really at the end of the day are advanced chemicals and polymers. So these are some of the areas that a problem which might have taken 5-6 years to solve, the supply chain problem, with looking into the ARC, into this platform, with this merged amalgamated data and software workflows, you can solve it sometimes in minutes.
And you mentioned at the top that some of the top industrial concerns commercially use this technology, this approach, I should say, to finding things, like a company like John Deere, or is that what you mean?
A company like John Deere, a company like Apple, a company like Komatsu out of Japan, a company like Huawei in China. This approach. Now, the DoD, for its industrial needs, as it manages these large contracts from the primes on down to all the subcontractors and lower tiers, it's got some unique issues. One is the law that governs it, and
which precludes China.
Yes, definitely does. So the DoD employee, whether it's a uniformed personnel or it's a civil servant, their workflows are going to be different than their peers in a commercial company, and they can't just use they need software that's designed so they just compress. They don't want to go through 7 strokes to do something. They want to do it in 2 strokes. So what Govini did is we produced software